Alright, so we are doing the third shiur for Simmons Yz3 and the Shagas Aryeh, which is speaking about the latest time to daven Mincha, which is a machlokus between the Shagas Aryeh and Rabbeinu Yonah and Rabbeinu Tam. That's at least what it seems now. We're going to see, hopefully tonight, the Rishonim that maybe side with the Shagas Aryeh, that the other Rishonim say that you only have until Shkia, which, what we refer to as Shkia, they're referring to as Tchilas Shkia. And after that, you can't have a mincha anymore, even according to Shitas Chacham, that say you have until night, means only until Shkia. The Shagas Aryeh holds you have until Tzeitzes Uchavim. We saw 3 Gemaras so far, really, that we discussed this concept. It has to do with when you could do the Zrikas Hadam for the Tamid Shel Bein Arbayim, because the Tfilos are connected to the Karbanos, the Iker Kapar of the carbon comes at the Zrikas Hadam, and therefore Rabbeinu Tam and Rabbeinu Yonah are going to say that Zrika is only until Shkia. Shagas Aryeh is going to say it's until nightfall. So one source we brought was the Gemara in Zvachim, which said that the blood becomes pasul at Shkia, which would seem to be like the Shita Rabbeinu Yonah, and plus the fact is that we have a special pasuk over there to teach us that din, even though in general, we know all vodos of the day have to be done during the day, so therefore that would also imply that maybe it's an earlier time during the day than Tzeitzes Uchavim. And the Shagas Aryeh, though, he explained that no, Shkia over there means Sof Shkia, which means Tzeitzes Uchavim. The psukim are needed either, as Rashi explains, according to the Shita, that if I would bring the blood up to the Mizbeach, it wouldn't become pasul in Lina, and therefore I might be able to sprinkle it the next day. Kamash on the extra pasuk that no, I can't sprinkle the next day, I need to sprinkle it that day. Tosas had issues with the Shita of Rashi, although Rashi's explanation seemed to fit the best in the Gemara. Shagas Aryeh, he brought another possible explanation that you could use it to, you need the extra pasuk to teach us that even the 3 extra sprinklings of the blood of the chatas, which are not ma'akiv, still also have to be done during the day. He brought a raya from that Gemara about the chatas itself. Rashi explains it based on the Gemara that we were discussing in Zvachim, plus the Gemara there says after nightfall, I believe the Lashon, or maybe the Lashon was Laila. So over there also we see it's clearly referring to the end of Tzeitzes Uchavim. The other Gemara they brought was the Gemara in Psachim, which spoke about the 15 mil. According to the way Tosas understands, the 15 mil is from the time the Chiyuv begins at Chatzos until Shkia. So we see that the Karban Pesach has to be done during that time period specifically. The Shagas Aryeh brought a Rambam, which said really it's referring to the 15 mil from before Chatzos. We don't have to go into all the questions and answers on that Rambam, but suffice it to say, the Shagas Aryeh did not think that was the correct explanation of the Gemara. However, Shagas Aryeh says it's a special din by Shchitas Pesach. Shchitas Pesach, the pasuk says Bein Harbayim. Bein Harbayim means the afternoon, not the evening, and therefore it's limited to Shkia. That's a special din by the Shchita, and the sprinkling of the blood, though, could be done after Shkia. So that's where we were holding, more or less. And we're discussing the psukim that the pasuk says by the Karban Pesach. It uses that lashon of v'shachtu es kol kaladas Yisrael bein harbayim. So you see that it specifically refers to the shchita has to be done bein harbayim, and therefore he also wanted to explain, even though we have another pasuk by the Karban Pesach which says bein harbayim ya'asu oso, that you do the Karban Pesach bein harbayim, and it's not clear what doing means, right? Doing l'chora would include also the sprinkling of the blood, and it seems to be specifically bein harbayim. Shagas Aryeh says no, since the first pasuk in Shemos, when it said bein harbayim, was referring specifically to the shchita, so also over here the yasu, which is a generic term, doesn't tell us what, is referring specifically to the shchita, has to be done bein harbayim, but the zrika could be done afterwards. So the Shagas Aryeh wants to explain the same thing with the psukim about the Karban Tamid. The Karban Tamid, it says Zasher Ta'asa Al HaMizbeach Kivasa B'nei Shana Shnayim Al Yom Tamid Es HaKeves HaEchad Ta'asa Baboker Veis HaKeves HaSheni Ta'asa Bein Harbayim. Right, that the second keves, the afternoon Tamid, has to be done Bein Harbayim. So what's the being done? What is it? So if it refers to also the Zrika, that would be like Shitas Rabbeinu Tam, that the Zrika has to be done specifically during Bein Harbayim, which we said is before Shkia. The Shagas Aryeh, however, he'll explain the pasuk differently, and he'll say, no, Tasa here refers specifically to the Shchita, and the reason for that would be that since we see this Lashon by the Karban Pesach, that it has to be Ya'asu Bein Harbayim, and over there the Asiyah refers specifically to the Shchita, even though it doesn't have to, right, as far as the word could refer to any of the Avodos. So here also, when he uses that same wording of Tasa Bein Harbayim by the Karban Tamid, we're going to say it refers specifically to the Shchita. That's what we're going to say it refers to. And he brings a support to this from the Gemara in Menachos, Daf Chav Tesam Aleph, which is Mara Makom Yudalid, which page is that? Sounds probably already on like the third page. Fourth page of the Mara Makomos. Okay. Fourth page of the Mara Makomos. And the Gemara there says as follows. Tana Deveir Bishmol, Shlosha Devarim Hayukashin Lo Moshe, Ad Shehera Lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Etzbo. There are three things that Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time understanding until HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him. Ve'elohein, they are Menorah, Rosh Chodesh, V'Shratzim. Menorah D'Chsev is Masa Menorah. Right, the word Zeh implies that he's being shown something. Rosh Chodesh D'Chsev HaChodesh HaZeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. Shratzim D'Chsev V'Zeh Lachem HaTomei. V'yesh Omerim, some say, Av Hilchos Shchita, also Shchita, Shnever as the pasuk says, V'Zeh Asher Tasa Al Mizbeach. Right, so there's that pasuk. It says Tasa, it doesn't say what, and the Gemara seems to understand that the Tasa refers specifically to Shchita. So we see that to say that the Tasa in this pasuk by the Karban Tamid refers to Shchita is not so far out, especially because that's the way the pasuk started. Zasher Tasa al Mizbeach, and then it continued to say, right, Kevas Achad Tasa B'Boker, as a Kevas Hashini Tasa Bein Harbayim, and so we see with this Lashon of Asiyah in these psukim, at least according to the Gemara Menachos, could be referring to just Shchita, and that's the way the Shagas Aryeh wants to explain. So the Shagas Aryeh explains that, in fact, we could explain that this is the machlokus between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. The Rabbi Yehuda says that Asiyah refers to all of the Avodos, right, by Karban Pesach, by the Shchita, right, that first pasuk is talking about the Shchita, the Karban Pesach. That's fine, but when we get to the Ta'aseh, not 100% sure about by Karban Pesach what he would say, but definitely the Tasa of Tasa Bein Harbayim by the Karban Tamid, that we're going to say refers to all of the Avodos. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is going to say all of the Avodos have to be done Bein Harbayim. Now there's going to be a little bit of a difference between the way we hold by the Karban Pesach and the way Rabbi Yehuda holds. Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold that Bein Harbayim is only up until Plag HaMincha. Right, Shkia is after Plag HaMincha. And Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold you only have until Plag HaMincha, but that's just because of a different understanding of what the word Bein Harbayim means. Bein Harbayim means sometime earlier in the afternoon, not all the way until the evening. We would have said until Shkia, like what we say generally by Karban Pesach, but Rabbi Yehuda says not all the way until Shkia, you only have until Plag HaMincha, which is a little bit before Shkia. And therefore, since he holds that Tasa Bein Harbayim includes the Zrika Sadam, so that means the entire carbon has to be finished before Plag HaMincha, which when we would turn that into what we would have to do for Tfilas Mincha, it would mean you'd have to daven before Plag HaMincha. That would be the way Rabbi Yehuda holds. The Chachamim, they say no. Tasa, like the way the Shagas Aryeh explained, that Tasa is referring only to the Shchita, but the Zrika can be done all the way until Tzeitzach Chochavim. So the Shagas Aryeh now, at least what we're going to see, when I was summarizing today, I did a little bit of a different order, but we'll just keep the order that I have here in my notes just so I don't get confused. First, we're going to bring a few other proofs from different Gemaras that the Zrikas Adam is until Tzeitzach Chochavim, right, which translates for us until Mincha also is until Tzeitzach Chochavim according to Shlitas Chachamim. And then we're going to see some sources that Tfilas HaMincha itself is until Tzeitzach Chochavim. Right? In other words, so both of them give us the same result. For Mincha, one is a little bit indirect and one is more direct. So let's see some of the sources for the Zrikas Hadam according to the Shitas Chachavim is until Tzeitzach Chochavim. So let's see the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, and this Gemara is found elsewhere as well, that the Mishnah says, B'rishona haya halulav nital v'mikdash, this is Tesvav in the Mara Makomos, that they originally took the lulav in the Beis HaMikdash Shiva, all 7 days of Sukkot, Uva Medina Yom Echad, and outside of the Beis HaMikdash, only one day. Mishachar Beis HaMikdash Hiskin Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai She'ilulav Nito Medina Shiva Zeich LaMikdash. So Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that we do lulav all 7 days of Sukkot outside of the Beis HaMikdash, and that's in order to remind us of the Beis HaMikdash. That's one takana that Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai did. And the other takana was V'sheyehei Yom Henef Kulo Aser, that the day of the waving is completely Aser, and that refers to the Hakravas HaOmer. You cannot eat new grain until the Omer is brought. The Omer is brought on the 2nd day of Pesach. So when the Beis HaMikdash is built, so it's dependent on when the Omer is brought. When there's no more Beis HaMikdash, so when can you start eating the new grain? So it seems on a D'oraisa level, this is Machlokes in the Gemara, but it seems the Pashtus, and what we're going to be seeing in the Gemara, is on a D'oraisa level, really, you should be able to eat the new grain already from the beginning of the day. When there's a Beis HaMikdash, you have to wait until the carbon is brought, but there's no Beis HaMikdash, so then once the day starts, you could already eat from the new grain. But Chazal, Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was Masaki that you have to wait the whole day's Aser, and you can only start eating the new grain the next day. Now why is that? So my taima, now we have to skip down to the 2 dots in the Gemara. Kulo Aser. My taima, why is that? Meher Yivana Beis HaMikdash. Soon the Beis HaMikdash will be built. The Yomer, and people will say, Eshtakad Milo Achalnu B'Hayar Mizrach. Last year we ate as soon as it got light on the 2nd day of Pesach. Akshav Nami Nechel. So now that the Beis HaMikdash is built, it should be the same thing. We should also eat immediately when the day starts. Below Yadi, people are not going to realize that Shtaka Lo Haya Omer Hayar Mizrach Hitter. That since last year there was no carbon, so therefore you were able to eat the new grain from the beginning of the day. Hashadika Omer. Now that the Beis HaMikdash is built and there is a carbon, Omer matir, so the Omer is what allows him to eat the new grain. So the Gemara wants to know, Demivni Emas, when are we concerned the Beis HaMikdash is going to be built? Ilema de'ifni b'shitzar, if we're going to be concerned that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be built on the 16th, on the 2nd day of Pesach itself, Harei Heir Mizrach Hitter. So that's already after the day started and the grain already was mutter. Right? You only have to wait for the carbon if, when the day starts, you're expecting there to be a carbon. But if when the day starts, there's no Beis HaMikdash, and you didn't expect there to be a carbon, the fact that the Beis HaMikdash is built later that day is not going to retroactively make the grain usher, so that wouldn't be problematic. Eladivnich b'chamisar. So maybe it was built on the 15th of Nisan. Mechatzos hayom u'lalon lishtri. If so, then really we should allow the new grain to be eaten from a chatzos on. Dehatnan, because it says in the Mishnah, harachokin mutarin mechatzos hayom ulahalon, that even in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, people that were far away and didn't know when the carbon would be brought, they're allowed to eat from the new grain starting from chatzos. Why? Because Beis Din is not going to be lazy in bringing the carbon omer. So our answer is Lo nitzercha de'ivni b'chamisar samach l'shkias hachama inami nivni b'leilaya. Either it was built on the 15th close to Shkia, or was built at night. It was in a situation where perhaps they wouldn't be able to get everything together quickly, and it would take them until who knows when to bring the carbon over. Right? In a regular situation, they always bring the carbon over by chatzos. So the 2 times you really should have to deal with is either hay or mizrach, right, when it gets light outside. That's when there is no omer. And if there is an omer, chatzos is the latest time they would bring it. What would be the reason to make a takana that the whole day you can't eat from the new grain? The only situation would be that we're concerned there will be some sort of issue based on when the Beis HaMikdash is built, that they won't be able to get their act together 100% on time. That first year they'll bring the carbon omer late perhaps that day, or maybe not at all, and then you'd have to wait until the end of the day in order for it to become mutter. But other than that, we wouldn't have a concern. Now, it's known from many sources, we're not going to go through them, but we're in Zvachim Yud Gimel, Menachos Yud Beis Yud Gimel, that the hakrava of the kamitza of a mincha has the same dinim as zrikas dam of a carbon. They have the same dinim for many, many things. And therefore, if we would say that the zrika of blood can only be done until shkia, then we would say also that a carbon wouldn't be able to be brought until, it would not be able to be brought after shkia. Carbon mincha also would have to be brought before shkia. So the carbon omer that we're referring to over here is referring to the carbon omer of, carbon omer is a mincha that the Kmitza is brought, which is like the Zrika of a carbon. It's clear from the Gemara that if there would be a Beis HaMikdash, then they would have to bring the Omer sometime between the beginning of the day and Tzeis HaKochavim, because it says the whole day of the 16th is usher to eat Chadash, because we're concerned for the case whether there will be a Beis HaMikdash and they won't bring it all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim. So we see that you're allowed to bring this carbon until Tzeis HaKochavim. If you could bring an Omer until Tzeis HaKochavim, that means you could sprinkle the blood of a carbon until Tzeis HaKochavim. That's one proof of the Shagas Aryeh. Another proof of the Shagas Aryeh is a Mishnah in Megillah Daf Chaf Amud Beis. And this Mishnah is actually such a great proof. It's a very, very clear, straightforward Mishnah. And the Mishnah says in the Ost Tezayin in the Mar Makomos, Kol Hayom Kosher L'Kriyas Megillah. The whole day is kosher to read Megillah. L'Kriyas Halal, L'Kriyas Shofar, L'Kriyas Ulav, L'Kriyas HaMusafim, Musafim. Right, so you see a carbon musaf can be brought all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim, right? All of these mitzvahs that we're talking about, that you have the whole day. What does it mean the whole day? The whole day means until Tzeis HaKochavim. And we know that's true by all of these mitzvahs. Right? If you didn't read the Megillah during the day, you can read it all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim. So also for a carbon musaf, you didn't bring a carbon musaf, you can bring the carbon musaf all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim. You don't have to stop sprinkling the blood by Shkia. Ula vidoi haparim, ula vidoi meiser, ula vidoi yom kippurim, lismicha, Lishchita, Litnufa, Ulagasha, Likmitza, Ulaktara, Limalika, Ulakabala, Ulahazaya, and sprinkling the blood. Right, this is mafurish here. Sprinkling the blood is something that you have all day to do, and all day means until Tzeis. It's a clear Mishnah, like the Shagas Aryeh. There's also another source, which is Yerushalmi and Brachos, Perek Daled Halacha Aleph. My time of Rabbanan. What's the reason for Shitas Chachamim that you could dive a mincha until Tzeis? That's what it's referring to there. Shnai Mayom. The pasuk says by the carbon tamid 2 a day, and we learn from there Cholakas Hayom. You split the day. You have the first half of the day to bring the Tamid Shel Shachar, and the second half of the day to bring the Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim. We're going to finish the Yerushalmi because we're going to need it to know this Yerushalmi for later on, although the proof that we need we already saw, but I'll explain in a second. Time to Rabbi Yehuda, and the reason for Rabbi Yehuda is Shnayim L'yom, Chov L'yom Shnayim. Sorry, Shnayim L'yom, Chov L'yom. Shnayim L'yom means it's a chiyuv of the day, and Shnayim L'yom means Shnei Praklita L'yom, 2 officers for the day. Shnayim L'yom Shetei Shchitasin L'Shem Hayom, it has to be shechted for that specific day, and Shnayim L'yom Shetei Shchitasin Keneged Yom, it has to be Keneged the sun. It was talking about where exactly the carbon tamid is shechted. But what do the Rabbanan learn? They learn that you split the day, half the day to bring the carbon Tamid Shel Shachar, and half the day for the Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim. The Chacham hold that the Tamid Shel Shachar can be brought until Chatzos. And so we know that the Shitas of Chachamim is that Shachars can be davened, and because of the carbon tamid, can be brought all the way until Chatzos. So you have from Alos until Chatzos, 6 hours, a full 6 hours to bring the carbon tamid Shel Shachar. So if I'm splitting the day evenly, that I get that same amount of time to bring the tamid Shel Bein Arbaim. If I want that full 6 hours, that means I'm going to have from Chatzos all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim. Otherwise, it's not going to be a clear split or an even split of the day between the Tamid Shel Shachar and the Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim. So that's another proof that the Tamid is brought all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim. And he's going to bring 2 proofs that Mincha is also until Tzeis HaKochavim. One is the Gemara in Brachos Chavav Amud Beis. The Gemara says, it's the 18th Mar Malcolm Ches. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ad Abra shows. Rabbi Yehuda says you have until 4 hours of the day to say Shachris. Ibayluhu, and the question is Ad va'ad b'chlal, o dilma ad v'lo ad b'chlal. I think we quoted this Gemara in one of the previous year. When he says until 4 hours, does it include the 4th hour, or it's up until and not including the 4th hour? Tashma. So we'll bring a proof. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rabbi Yehuda says Ad plag hamincha. You have until plag hamincha to daven mincha. If it's not including that second half of the mincha time period, so I understand there's a difference between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. But if we're going to include the second half of the mincha, then Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda would be the same as the Rabbanan. As the way we understand is that you would take the Zman Mincha Kitana, which is from 9.5 hours on, until Tzeis HaKochavim, which is 12 hours, and you'd split that in half. And if we would include the second half of that split, that would take us all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim. If so, that would be the same as Shitas Chachamim. Now wait a second. If Rabbi Yehuda going all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim would be the same as Shitas Chachamim, then we see that the Chachamim hold that you can daven all the way until Tzeis HaKochavim. That's what the Gemara just said. The Shagas Aryeh is docha this proof. The truth is, I think the proof is much better than the answer he gives to the proof. But he says perhaps you could say that ad va'ad b'chlal would mean you could go past the first half of Mincha into the second half of Mincha, but of course you'd be limited by Shkia. Because if we know that Chachamim would limit you to Shkia, if we would know that, like Shitas Rabbeinu Tam, Shitas Rabbeinu Yonah, if we would know that according to Chachamim you'd be limited by Shkia, then according to Rabbi Yehuda you would also be limited by Shkia. In other words, we would give you the second half of the Mincha until Shkia, but certainly no more than that. I'm not sure what the svara would be for that, but that's what the Shagas Aryeh suggests as a possible deflection of this proof. Another proof is from the Gemara in Barachos Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, which is 19th Mara Makom Yates, starting on the 5th and last page of the Mara Makomos. And the Gemara says as follows: Tfilas Mincha Erev, they have Mincha until the evening, right? And this is the whole question: does Erev mean Shkia, or does Erev mean Seis? That's what we're trying to figure out. So I'm going to Rav Chisda Rav Yitzchak. Rav Chisda asked Rav Yitzchak, Hasam Amar Rav Kahana Halach Rav Yehuda. Over there, meaning by Shachris, Rav Kahana said the halacha should be like Rav Yehuda. Hol utnan v'vichirta kavase. Since there's a Mishnah in Maseches Eidos that holds like him. Hachamai, what would be the halacha in our situation? In other words, when it comes to Mincha, do we hold like Rav Yehuda, or do we hold like the Chachamim? Ishtik lo amar le v'lo. He was quiet and he didn't have anything to say. Amar Chisda said, Nichsi anan. So let's see. Midarav matzli shel Shabbos be'erev Shabbos mibod yom. Since Rav davened Ma'ariv on Shabbos, while it was still erev Shabbos during the day, made an early Shabbos, Shema mina halach Rav Yehuda. So we see the halachas like Rav Yehuda that you could daven Ma'ariv during the day. So you know Adarabba. We could say the other way. Either Rav Huna or Rabbanan lo havi matzli ad orta. Rav Huna and the Rabbanan, they would not daven Ma'ariv until it was actually Shabbos. Shema mina in halach Rav Yehuda. We see halachas not like Rav Yehuda. Hashvil idmar hilchas lo kamar v'lo kamar. Once we don't have a clear halacha one way or the other, then David kamar Avid, but David kamar Avid. If you want to do like this, you could do like this. If you want, you could do like that. No, that's the final psak. If you want, you could daven like Rav Yehuda. Means you could daven mincha before Plaga Mincha, and then you could daven Ma'ariv after Plaga Mincha. Or if you want, you could do like the Chachamim to daven Mincha all the way up until Erev, whatever that is. Then you could daven Ma'ariv after Erev. So the Shagas Aryeh points out that it says we're trying to bring a proof to Shitas Rav Yehuda from the fact that Rav davened he davened a Ma'ariv Shabbos when it was still day on Shabbos. After Shkia, still day. So if the Chachamim would say that you could already daven Ma'ariv after Shkia, because Ma'ariv always starts whenever the time Mincha ends. So if I could daven Ma'ariv right after Shkia, according to the Chachamim, why would this be a proof to Rav Yehuda? Maybe Rav davened Ma'ariv on Shabbos while it was still day after Shkia. Maybe that's what it means. And then we say, no, we have a proof from Rav Huna. They waited until nightfall to daven. That shows they hold like the Chachamim. So we see that the Shitas Chachamim is based on nightfall. It's based on Seis Chachamim. It's not based on Shkia. Now, we've brought a lot of proofs for the Shagas Aryeh. Now we're going to just show that the Shagas Aryeh is not alone. There are other Shitas that hold like the Shagas Aryeh as well. So the first is Rashi. Rashi on the Mishnah, when it says Tfilas Mincha Erev, I don't think I have a copy of this Rashi. I don't remember exactly where we quoted on the first page. That Gemara. Yeah. When it says Tfilas Mincha Erev, so Rashi says over there, Ad Shechashecha, until it gets dark. Dark is Tzeis HaKochavim. Dark is not Shkia, and therefore Rashi, he says, clearly holds like the Shagas Aryeh. The second is that Tosas himself holds like the Shagas Aryeh, right? Tosas quoted in those Tosas that we saw Rabbeinu Tam quoted as holding that it's Shkia, but the Shagas Aryeh wants to say that Tam Tosos, right, when it's not quoting Rabbeinu Tam, in fact holds like the Shagas Aryeh, that you have until Tzeis Chuchavim. He brings a very nice proof from the first Tosfos in Maseches Brachos, which is Mar Malkum Chaf, Tosfos Brachos Daf Bezim with Aleph Devei Maschal Me'imasai, and he says as follows: Ve'im Tomar, if you're going to ask, Hey Ach Anu Mispal and Tfilas Mincha Samach Kashecha, how do we daven Mincha all the way up until when it's going to get dark? Right, dark means Tzeis Chuchavim. Va'afilu la'achar Plag Mincha, even though it's after Plag. Yishlomar, so you could say, the Kaimalon Karabanon, we hold like Shitas Chachamim. The Amri Zman Tfilas Mincha ad Harev, that say you could daven Mincha until the evening. Va'amrina l'kamon, and we say later on, Hashdalu itmar hilchas alo kamar alo kamar David kamar Avid kamar Avid. You can do whichever way you want. Mikol makom kasha, but it's still difficult to have a katrei kule disaster nadari, because we end up passing like two kulas that contradict one another. Shari meiz tam anu ismalim arvis miyad achar plaga mincha. Why do we daven ma'ariv? We are willing to daven ma'ariv immediately after plaga mincha. Mishum dekaimelon deshas ha-mincha kala, because we hold minchas over. Kedei Rabbi Yehuda. Umiyad havizman arvis, and it's time for ma'ariv. Vizman hatfila atzma. When it comes to davening ma'ariv, when it comes to davening mincha, lo kaimelon Rabbi Yehuda like Rabbanan. We're not holding Rabbi Yehuda. We hold like the Rabbanan. We daven mincha even after plaga mincha. Al kain Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says, not Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbeinu Yitzchak. Bali Tosos. Devade Kriya Shema shel beis HaKnesses Iker. That when you say Kriya Shema and Shol, that's the main Kriya Shema, even though it's before Tzeis HaChochavim. Va'anu shemispalin arvis mibod yom. When we daven ma'ariv during the day, Svirlan kahani tanai de Gemara. We hold like the other Tanam in the Gemara. The Amri, they say misha shekish hayom, that you can already start saying Kriya Shema at the time when people generally make Kiddush, let's say on Friday night, which is a little earlier than Tzeis. They gab misha shmei adam nifnasim l'hasiv, or when people go in to eat, the Hainu Sudas Erev Shabbos, the Suda of the night of Shabbos. The V'yais mibod yom, which is still also mibod yom, it's still before Tzeis. Ume osa shah haviz madfil, and from that time you could already start davening ma'ariv. So it's clear from Tosos that he understands. If we would hold like Chachamim, that would be after these times. If we would hold like these other Tanoim, we could get closer to a time in between Plag and Tzeis HaChochavim. Right? So we could get these times of when you make Kiddush, or when you eat the Suda on Erev Shabbos. The Shagas Aryeh says all of those times are after Shkia. So if we're trying to find a time between Rabbi Yehuda Shita and in between the Chachamim Shita, and we're talking about times which are after Shkia, so it must mean that the Chachamim Shita is even more after Shkia. So if we want to know, is the Chachamim Shita Shkia, like Rabbeinu Tam says, or Tzeis, like the Shagas Aryeh says, it's clear from this Tosos that he holds Tzeis, like the Shagas Aryeh, not like Rabbeinu Tam. So this was the sheet of the Ri in Tosfos. So the Ri in Tosfos is going to hold like the Shagas Aryeh, even though when Tosfos quotes Rabbeinu Tam is holding like the other sheet that we go with Shkia. Okay, so now we get into a very, very, very interesting discussion. Now that we got everything clear, according to the Shagas Aryeh, that you have until Tzeis HaChochavim, and the reason why you have until Tzeis HaChochavim is based on the pasuk that says you do the carbon of Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim until Shkia, right? That's what he said. You have to do it during Bein Harbayim, which is until Shkia. That's only the Shchita, but the Zrikas Adam can be done until Tzeis. He says, if that's how we're going to explain the pasuk according to the Chachamim, so we have a big problem, because the pasuk had said two things. Right? It said that we do the Tamid Shel Shachar in the morning, and then we do the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim during Bein Harbayim. We said Bein Harbayim, that we do the carbon Tamid, means the Shchita, but the Zrika you do after. If so, if we would apply that same reading of the pasuk to the beginning of the pasuk, then we would understand that I have to shecht the Tamid Shel Shachar before Chatzos, but I can sprinkle the blood later. And the Zmanim for Tefillah always follow, as we pointed out, the Zrika Saram. That's why I have until Tzeis HaChochavim in order to daven Mincha. If so, why do I have to finish davening Shachris by Chatzos? I only have to stop shechting the carbon Tamid by Chatzos, but I could sprinkle the blood later. It's unclear until when, but sometime after Chatzos I could be sprinkling the blood. How come I can't daven Shachris after Chatzos according to Shita's Chachamim? So he explains that the reason why that would be is going to be based on that Yerushalmi that we saw. Right? The Yerushalmi said in Os Yud the Yerushalmi said the reason for Rabbanan was Shnaim liyom chalok es hayom. You have to split the day. So to split the day means I only have half of the day for the zrika of the Tamid Shel Shachar and half the day for the zrika of Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim. It's true the shchita for the Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim is limited until Shkia, but the zrika I have the whole half of the day. If so, then I'm learning from that drasha that for the zrika of the Tamid Shel Shachar is also only half the day. Right, so it's true from the pasuk itself. I don't see that the zrika has to be done from before chatzos, but from the drasha of the Shnaim Liyom that I'm splitting the day, from there I do see that the zrika has to be done before chatzos. So that's how we're going to understand according to the Shita of the Chacham. And that pasuk, he points out, says, "V'amartem lahem zeh ha'yisha asher takrivu laHashem kavasam neishana tamimim shnayim la'yom la'asabit." And that pasuk doesn't use the word ta'aseh, which we said ta'aseh is always shchita according to Shita Chachamim. It uses the word takrivu, and takrivu is certainly the zrika, and therefore we're learning from that pasuk about the zrika that the day is split, and from that pasuk we're going to see that you can't do the zrikas karban tamid shel shachar after chatzos. It turns out, says the Shagas Aryeh, that the machlokas between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, they have two machloksim. One is for the zman of the Tamid Shel Shachar, and one is for the zman of the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim. And says the Shagas Aryeh, it would seem that the two machloksim are interconnected. They're dependent on how we learn these psukim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he doesn't have this drasha of splitting the day. Right, this chalok hayom, the first half of the day and the second half of the day, he doesn't have that drasha. He has just the drasha that you have to do the carbon tamid in the morning. What does he mean, do the carbon tamid? Zrika. You have to do the zrikas of the carbon tamid in the morning. He's not going to learn from the carbon pesach that we said, tasa bein harbayim, that tasa was talking about only the shchita, and therefore here also the tasa is going to be only shchita. He's not going to learn that way. He's going to learn that when it says tasa without saying shchita, it means also the zrika. And it has to be done specifically in the morning, and he holds the morning is only until 4 hours. He holds you don't have all the way until chatzos to be called morning. Right? Chatzos is already the middle of the day. You only have the first 4 hours of the day. And therefore everything has to be done for the Tamid Shel Shachar before 4 hours, including the zrikas hadam. That's why he says you only have until the 4 hours in order to daven shachris. And that's why he could then learn that when it says to do the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim, that do the Ta'aseh also includes the Zrika. And therefore the Zrika has to be done in the afternoon, not all the way until the evening, and that's why he's going to limit you until Plag HaMincha, in order to daven Mincha. So we see the way Rabbi Yehuda learns the Pasuk shows us what his Shita is, both for the Tamid Shel Shachar and for the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim. As opposed to the Shita of the Chachamim, whenever the Pasuk says Asiya, it means Shchita. And therefore it says the Tamid Shel Shachar is shechted in the morning. The Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim is shechted only until Shkia. As far as when you could sprinkle the blood, he learns out from a different pasuk. He learns out from the pasuk of Takrivu LaHashem Shnayim Ayom, split the day. So we're going to split the day, and therefore for the first half of the day you have for Zrika all the way till Chatzos, and then we're going to also learn that the second half of the day for the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim is all the way until Tzeis. Okay, so both of them, from the same psukim, is where you learn the dinim of the Tamid Shel Shachar and the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim. This presents us with a major difficulty, because we paskin lamaisa, the way it comes out in the Gemara, and the way we paskin lamaisa is, when it comes to Shacharis, we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. You have to daven Shacharis until 4 hours. And then the Gemara asked, what about Mincha, how do we paskin? And what did Rav Kahana say? Rav Kahana says some sort of lashon. Wait, where is the... I'm getting lost over here. The last page of the Gemara was right. Rav Kahana said... No, this was Rav Chisda answering Rav Yitzchak. Rav Chisda said, I don't know. Right, I don't know if the halacha, right? Just because over there, like Rav Yehuda, is the halacha like Rav Yehuda here as well? So Rav Chisda didn't know. Rav Yitzchak didn't know. In the end, we say it's a suffix. Why is it a suffix? If the reasoning for Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim are the same, it's the same machlokes by the Talmud Shel Shachar as the Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim. It's how to learn those psukim. If I'm learning the psukim like Rabbi Yehuda for the Talmud Shel Shachar, then I have to learn the psukim like Rabbi Yehuda, also for the Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim, and therefore the halacha is going to also be like Rabbi Yehuda for Mincha. What's the big suffix in the Gemara, and how come we don't know, and how come in the end we pass like you do either way you want? By Shachars we know we pass like Rabbi Yehuda. If the two machloksim are linked together, so then we should know exactly what to do by Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim. We should pass like Rabbi Yehuda. So this is a major question against the mahalach of the Shagas Aryeh. And the Shagas Aryeh says that, in fact, there is a little bit of a suffix whether the two machloksim are completely tied together or not. Because you could say that not every time it says tasa, it has to mean the same thing. Right up until now, we've been saying tasa has to mean the same thing. According to the Chachamim, it always means shchita, and according to Yehuda, it always includes zrika. That's what we've been saying up until now, but it's not necessarily true. Maybe you could say that tasa refers to shchita only if it's a tasa of bein harabayim. But if it's a tasa not bein harabayim, then we're not going to learn it from Pesach. Right? Pesach was specifically tasa bein harabayim. Right? So we know that shchita has to be done bein harabayim. So therefore, maybe when it says the carbon tamid shall bein harabayim tasa, so that I'll say, okay, that will be only the shchita. But I can maybe do the zrika later. But that wouldn't necessarily mean that the Talmud Shel Shachar, when it says tasa, has to mean shchita. Maybe only a tasa bein harabayim is shchita, but the tasa in the morning could be zrika. That's a possibility, right? Of how to dash them psukim. Now, according to that possibility, it would come out that shacharis we could learn like Rabbi Yehuda, that the zrika has to be done also in the morning, because tasa in the morning is not going to be limited to shchita, and therefore the tasa in the morning is including the zrika, and that would be until 4 hours. Nevertheless, when it says tasa bein harabayim, that would only be the shchita, but the zrika I could do all the way until Teisach Chachavim. So we do have a possibility of reading the pasuk in a way, right? Even though Rabbi Yehuda doesn't learn that way, and the Chachamim don't learn that way, but we could learn the pasuk in a way where it's not, the two machloksim are not related, and that in the morning we would hold like Rabbi Yehuda, and then in the evening we could hold like the Chachamim. So therefore, it is a question that the Gemara has. Just because we hold like Rabbi Yehuda in the morning doesn't mean we have to hold like him in the afternoon. We can hold like the Chachamim in the afternoon. And this, in fact, says the Shagas Aryeh, that's why the Gemara has a suffix. Because really, the Gemara shouldn't have a suffix. If the two machloksim are intertwined, then we know the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. And if not, then we know the halacha is like the Chachamim. Because Yachad Arabim, halacha karabim. If it's not connected to the other machlokas where we pass like Rabbi Yehuda, it's a standalone machlokas. So in a standalone machlokas, Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, we would pass like the Chachamim. So what's the question in the Gemara? The question in the Gemara is this: do we view it as if the machlokasim are interconnected, or do we look at it perhaps differently, the way we just looked at it, and say the machlokasim are not interconnected? And since we don't know, so now we have our suffix. Because we have our suffix, that's why we paskin in the morning like Rabbi Yehuda, and in the afternoon you could do whichever way you want. The Shagas Aryeh leaves off with a very strong question against the Rambam. Let's see these two Rambams, Chaf Aleph and Chaf Beis. The Rambam says, Talmud Shel Bein Harabayim, Shochno So, Misha Yarech Hatzel, V'yira'eh L'chol Sheherech. You can start shechting the Talmud in the afternoon when you can start seeing the shade on the eastern side of a wall, right? Because the sun is already tilted towards the western side. It's after Chatzos. And everyone could already see that. It's a din d'Rabbanan, you have to wait a little bit. You can't do it exactly at Chatzos. You have to wait until it's clear that it's Chatzos, or after Chatzos. That's from 6.5 hours on ad sof hayom, until the end of the day. What do we say sof hayom would mean? Tzeis, right? The end of the day. You have until the whole end of the day in order to sprinkle the blood of the carbon tamid shel bein harabayim. And it says the same thing by carbon pesach. Shchitas ha-pesach acher chatzos, v'im shchato kodem chatzos pasel. Pesach has to be after chatzos. V'in shochno so el acher tamid shel bein harabayim. we only shechted after the carbon talmud. Achar shemakdir and Keturah shall be in Arbaim, and after the Keturahs, v'achar shematimus aniros, and then after we also clean out the candles for the menorah. Maschil and lishkotas apsachim, that's when we start shechting the carbon pesach, ad sof hayom, until the end of the day, tzeis ha'kochavim. That's the way the Rambam holds. So, firstly, what we see from the Rambam is he holds that the zrika is still tzeis, right? Not until Shkia. So that would be another proof to the understanding of the Shagas Aryeh. But the Shagas Aryeh is bothered by something else over here. How do we paskin for the Talmud shall be in Arbaim? It's machokis, right? Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda says you only have until Plag HaMincha. The Chachamim say you have, and there was the whole machokis we had. What do the Chachamim say? Until Shkia or until Tzeis? We said until Tzeis, right? The Chachamim say you have until Tzeis. Rabbi Yehuda says you only have until Plag HaMincha. How do we paskin? So we said in the Gemara, it's a suffix. So by tefillah, which is only a durabanan, you can do whichever way you want. You can make it like this shita, you can make it like that shita. But if we would then take the din to karbanos, if we'd have to make a psak for a carbon, how late can I bring the carbon? Wouldn't we think that it's a suffix d'oraisa? We'd have to be machmir like the shita of Yehuda, and you would only have until Plag HaMincha? Why would the Rambam say you have all the way till Tzeis HaChavim like the Chachamim? That's not the way the Gemara paskin. The Gemara paskin that we don't know what the halacha is. If we don't know what the halacha is, we have to be machmer. We can't be mekel. So how come the Rambam is being mekel in these dinim to allow the zrikas hadam until tzeis ha'kochavim? That's the question of the Shagas Aryeh, and the Shagas Aryeh leaves it off as a question without an answer. But I'll give you an answer in 1 second. But first, I wanted to point out something else the Shagas Aryeh didn't ask, but I had this question until I realized the obvious answer. There's really a second question we could ask on the Rambam, which is, the carbon talmud was a whole question of when exactly do you have until shech the carbon talmud, because do you learn out from the carbon pesach, or do you not, and what about the tasa, and what does tasa mean? So we had the whole balagan for the carbon talmud. But the carbon pesach, you for sure have to finish before Shkia. That was the whole Gemara in Pesachim, the 15 mil between Chatzos and Shkia. You don't have until Tzeis HaKochavim for the carbon pesach. Right? And here he's talking about shechting the carbon pesach also. Maschil and lishchodas apsachim at sof hayom. He allows you to shech the carbon pesach until after Shkia. No one allowed that. Shagas Aryeh didn't allow that. And Rabbi Yehuda didn't allow that. No one allowed that. So how by carbon pesach it's even more of a question? So the truth is, I only have this question because I forgot what we spoke about in the previous year. The Rambam learned that whole Gemara in Pesachim differently. Right? He said the 15 mil wasn't talking about the Zman Shechita. It was talking about from Nates until when you could start shechting. So therefore that is referring to the, that's the 15 mil. It has nothing to do with the Shkia. And we don't see from the Rambam at all that you have to darshan when it says you shech the carbon pesach bein harbayim, that bein harbayim specifically has to be a time before tzeis. You have all the way until tzeis to shech the carbon pesach. The Gemara which said 15 mil had nothing to do with Shkia, because the Rambam had his whole other explanation of that Gemara. Right? So even though we saw the Ramban did say that you can't shech the carbon pesach until after, you can't shech it after Shkia, and the Shagas Aryeh said you can't shech it after Shkia, and Rabbi Yehuda said you can't shech it after Shkia, but the Rambam doesn't have any reason why he has to hold that you can't shech the carbon pesach after Shechita, and in fact he holds that you could. The only question we really have though is this question of the Shagas Aryeh.